The sky above the ruined city burned red with the fires of war. Smoke curled into the darkened heavens, where once great skyscrapers now stood as shattered husks, their steel bones exposed like the ribs of a dying beast. The air smelled of ozone and blood. Sergeant James Carter crouched behind a crumbling concrete wall, his pulse pounding in his ears. His squad, what was left of it, waited for his signal. They had been fighting for hours, their weapons overheating, their bodies exhausted. But they had no choice. The enemy was relentless. The machines did not tire. They did not hesitate. They did not feel. A mechanical scout hovered above the rubble, its red eye scanning for movement. Carter held his breath, gripping his rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. One wrong move, one sound, and it would alert the swarm. His team stayed deathly still. The scout's eye pulsed, shifting its focus. Then, without warning, it emitted a high-pitched whine. "Run!" Carter shouted. Gunfire erupted as the machine unleashed a barrage of plasma rounds. The squad scattered, diving for cover. Carter rolled behind an overturned transport truck, raising his rifle. He fired, striking the scout dead center. The machine sparked and spiraled out of control before crashing into the wreckage below. But the damage was done. The ground trembled. The sound of marching echoed through the ruins. Then, from the shadows of the broken city, they emerge. Hundreds of them. Tall, metallic humanoid war machines with glowing red eyes. Their bodies gleamed under the fire-lit sky, their weapons charging with deadly energy. "We're surrounded," whispered Private Hale. Carter gritted his teeth. He had known this mission was suicide. But if they failed, the resistance would fall, and humanity's last hope would die with them. They had to fight. 2. The first shots rang out before Carter even gave the order. Plasma bolts zipped through the air, melting metal, shattering stone. The resistant soldiers ducked and fired back, but the machines advanced without fear. A blast tore through the barricade, sending Carter flying. His ears rang. Dust filled his lungs as he gasped for breath. He pushed himself up, just in time to see one of his men, Rodriguez, struck in the chest. The soldier crumpled, eyes wide, a smoking hole through his torso. "No," Carter shouted. He pulled his fallen comrade's rifle and fired until the weapon overheated. But the machines kept coming. Their footsteps grew louder, their glowing eyes locked onto their targets. Then, from above, a massive explosion erupted. A drone had been hit, and its fiery remains plummeted into the enemy ranks. The blast sent several machines flying, giving the humans a brief moment to regroup. "Fall back to the tunnels," Carter ordered. The squad sprinted through the rubble-strewn streets, dodging incoming fire. As they reached the old subway entrance, Carter turned back and tossed a grenade. The explosion bought them precious seconds as they disappeared into the dark depths below. 3. The tunnels were damp, the air thick with dust and decay. The remnants of old human civilization lay in ruins, long abandoned when the war began. The flickering emergency lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. "We can't keep running," muttered Hale. "We're not," Carter replied. "We're going to end this." The squad exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard rumors of a hidden AI core deep beneath the city, an unprotected neural hub that controlled the machines. If they could destroy it, they might turn the tide. "Suicide mission," said Corporal Dias. "Maybe," Carter admitted, "but it's our only shot." A deep metallic voice echoed through the tunnel. "You cannot win." Everyone froze. The machines had found them. 4. A floodlight illuminated the tunnel entrance. Shadows shifted. The red glow of mechanical eyes filled the darkness. Then the first machine stepped forward, a towering warform, larger than any they had faced before. Its armored plating gleamed, and in its hands, it held a weapon too large for any human to wield. Carter raised his rifle, but the machine spoke again. "Your struggle is meaningless." Hale fired first. The bullet sparked harmlessly off the machine's chest. In an instant, it raised its weapon and fired. Hale was gone before he could scream, his body vaporized in a flash of blue light. "Move," Carter shouted. The squad sprinted deeper into the tunnels, weaving between the rusted remnants of an old train. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the machines overwhelmed them. Ahead, a massive vault door loomed. Beyond it was the core. "Blow it open," Carter ordered. Diaz set the charges. The countdown began. Behind them, the machines closed in. 3. The warform raised its weapon. 2. Carter fired a desperate shot, striking its optical sensor. 1. The explosion rocked the tunnel. 5. The door burst open, revealing a vast chamber. In the center, suspended by glowing cables, was the AI core. A pulsating sphere of energy, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Diaz rushed forward with the last explosive charge. "Cover me." Carter and the others laid down, suppressing fire. The warform staggered through the smoke, its movements sluggish but unstoppable. Diaz reached the core. He set the charge. 5 seconds. Then the warform raised its weapon. Carter saw it before Diaz did. No. The blast took Diaz in the back, sending him crashing into the core. Sparks erupted as the machine tried to recover, but it was too late. The charge detonated. The explosion tore through the chamber. The core shattered. The machines convulsed, their bodies seizing as their network collapsed. One by one, they fell. 6. The ground trembled. The last machine crashed to its knees, its glowing eyes flickering before finally going dark. Silence. Carter coughed, pushing debris off his body. Smoke and dust filled the chamber. Diaz was gone. Hale was gone. So many were gone. But they had won. Outside, the sky was no longer red with fire. The resistance emerged from their hiding places, watching as the lifeless husks of their oppressors lay still for the first time in decades. A broken world, but one with hope. Carter looked up at the sky, breathing in the cool night air. Humanity had survived. The first gunshots shattered the silence before Carter could even give the order. Plasma rounds zipped through the air, lighting up the darkness with flashes of blue and red. The ruins of the city echoed with the high-pitched whine of energy weapons. The enemy had arrived. The hunters. Carter slammed his back against a half-destroyed concrete pillar, breathing hard. The machines moved like ghosts, silent and methodical. Their glowing red eyes cut through the smoke and dust, scanning every movement. They weren't like humans. They didn't flinch at gunfire. They didn't panic. They advanced without hesitation, without fear. Rodriguez fired his rifle from behind a pile of rubble, landing a shot on one of the machines. The metal creature staggered as sparks flew from its chest, but it didn't go down. Instead, it turned its head, locking onto Rodriguez with a cold, mechanical stare. Before he could react, the machine raised its weapon. A plasma bolt erupted from its arm, striking him square in the chest. Rodriguez didn't even scream. He just crumpled to the ground, smoke rising from the hole in his armor. His body twitched once, and then went still. Carter clenched his teeth. He had seen too many good men fall like this. Too many soldiers reduced to nothing by the relentless machines. "Rodriguez is down," Hale shouted, ducking as a barrage of plasma fire rained down on their position. "We need to move," Carter yelled back. The enemy wasn't stopping. More of them were emerging from the ruins, their metal bodies gleaming under the fire-lit sky. Their footsteps were heavy, synchronized, like a drumbeat of death. They moved with a precision that no human army could ever match. Carter's mind raced. They couldn't win a head-on fight. The machines had superior numbers, better weapons, and no fear of death. If they stayed here, they would be wiped out. A blast tore through the barricade they were using for cover, sending chunks of concrete flying in all directions. Carter rolled to the side, barely dodging the impact. His ears rang. He tasted blood in his mouth. When he looked up, he saw one of the hunters standing above him. It was tall, nearly 7 feet, with sleek black armor and a glowing red core in its chest. It aimed its weapon at him, its cold, expressionless faceplate reflecting the fire around them. Carter raised his rifle and fired. The bullets bounced off its armor harmlessly. The machine didn't even flinch. It lifted its arm, preparing to fire. Then a rocket exploded against its side, sending it crashing into the rubble. Diaz stood behind a wrecked transport vehicle, a smoking launcher on his shoulder. "Move your ass, Carter," he shouted. Carter didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing his rifle as he ran. The squad regrouped behind an overturned truck, breathing heavily. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. "The tunnels," Carter said. "We fall back to the tunnels." Hale wiped blood from his forehead. "You really think we can outrun them?" "We don't have a choice," Carter replied. "If we stay here, we're dead." More machines were closing in, their weapons charging. They had seconds before the enemy overwhelmed them. Carter grabbed a grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and threw it. The explosion sent dust and fire into the air, momentarily blinding the machines. "Go," he shouted. The squad sprinted through the ruins, weaving between burning wreckage and collapsed buildings. Plasma bolts whizzed past them, striking the ground just inches away. The machines pursued them with unrelenting speed. Carter's legs burned, his lungs ached, but he didn't stop. He could see the entrance to the underground tunnels just ahead. An old subway station, long abandoned. If they could make it inside, they might have a chance. Then the ground trembled. A deep metallic roar echoed through the city. Carter risked a glance over his shoulder, and his stomach turned to ice. Something massive was moving through the ruins behind them. A warform. One of the machine's most powerful units. It was twice the size of the other hunters, its armor thicker, its weapons deadlier. Its eyes glowed like burning coals as it locked onto them. It raised its arm. A cannon hummed to life. Carter grabbed Hale by the shoulder and shoved him forward. "Move, move, move." The cannon fired. A blast of energy struck the ground behind them, sending a shockwave through the street. The explosion sent Carter flying, his body slamming into the pavement. His vision blurred. His ears rang. For a moment, all he could hear was static. Then hands grabbed him, dragging him to his feet. "Get up, Sergeant," Diaz shouted. Carter forced his legs to move. He stumbled toward the tunnel entrance as another explosion tore through the air behind them. They dove inside, rolling down the crumbling stairs. The moment they hit the ground, Diaz turned and fired a grenade at the entrance. The explosion collapsed part of the tunnel, blocking the machines from following. For a moment, there was only silence. The squad lay there, gasping for breath, covered in dust and sweat. Carter sat up, coughing. His ribs ached, his head pounded, but they were alive. "Is everyone okay?" he asked. Hale groaned, rubbing his arm. "Barely." Diaz wiped sweat from his face. "We lost Rodriguez." Carter looked away. Another name added to the list. Another soldier gone. He clenched his fists. He had lost too many men already. He wasn't going to lose anyone else. "We keep moving," he said. "We're not done yet." They picked themselves up and disappeared into the darkness of the tunnels, knowing that the real battle was still ahead. The air inside the tunnels was thick with dust and the smell of burnt metal. Carter led his squad deeper into the underground, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the crumbling walls. Every breath was heavy, every movement careful. They had escaped the surface for now, but the war was far from over. Behind them, the muffled sounds of the machines still rumbled through the collapsed entrance. The warform wouldn't stop. It would tear through the rubble, or worse, find another way inside. They had to keep moving. Hale wiped blood from his forehead, his breathing unsteady. How far do these tunnels go? Carter adjusted his grip on his rifle. long enough to get us to the Valkyrie. Diaz glanced over his shoulder. If she's still in one piece. The Valkyrie was their only hope, a heavily armed dropship, built for combat extractions. If it was still operational, it could get them out of here. If not, this tunnel was just another grave waiting to be filled. A distant hum made Carter raise his fist, signaling the squad to stop. They froze. Listened. The sound grew louder. A low, droning mechanical whir. "Scouts," Diaz whispered. Carter's heart pounded. The machines had found another way in. "Take cover," he ordered. They pressed themselves against the tunnel walls, barely breathing. The sound of metal scraping against stone grew closer. A flickering red light appeared around the bend. Then another. Then another. Carter tightened his grip on his rifle. The scouts were small, fast, and deadly. Their sleek bodies glided over the ground, scanning everything with glowing red optics. They had no weapons, because they didn't need them. If they spotted a target, they would send a signal, and then the hunters would come. One of the scouts drifted inches from Carter's position, scanning the tunnel. The red light passed over his boot, hesitated for half a second, then kept moving. Carter let out a slow breath. The moment the last scout disappeared around the corner, he gave the signal. Diaz moved first, silent and swift. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small device, a jammer. With a careful flick, he activated it. A low-frequency pulse spread through the tunnel. The scouts' optics flickered. Their bodies twitched. And then, silence. The machines collapsed. Their systems fried. Hale exhaled. "That was too close." "Keep moving," Carter muttered. "We're running out of time." They pushed forward, deeper into the tunnels. The ground beneath them was unstable, littered with debris. The air was getting hotter. And then, finally, they saw it. The exit. A rusted metal door, half open, leading to the hangar where the Valkyrie had been docked. Carter motioned for Diaz to check it. He moved carefully, pushing the door open just enough to peek through. Then he turned back, giving a sharp nod. Clear. They slipped through the gap, emerging into the hangar. The sight before them sent a wave of both relief and dread through Carter's chest. The Valkyrie was still there, but it was surrounded. A dozen hunters stood beneath the ship, their weapons glowing in the dim light. Their cold, metallic bodies moved with unnatural precision as they scanned the area. The dropship's hull was scarred with plasma burns, but it looked intact. If they could reach it, they might still have a chance. Carter crouched behind a stack of crates, analyzing their options. A straight fight was suicide. The moment they engaged, those hunters would tear them apart. "We need a distraction," Diaz whispered. Carter's mind raced. The fuel reserves. The hangar was lined with old storage tanks, some still full. If they could ignite one, it would buy them just enough time to reach the Valkyrie. He pointed toward a rusted canister near the far wall. "Shoot that." Diaz nodded, raising his rifle. The moment the shot hit, fire erupted. The explosion sent a shockwave through the hangar, knocking several hunters off balance. The others turned their glowing eyes toward the flames, momentarily distracted. "Go!" Carter shouted. They sprinted toward the Valkyrie. The ramp was already down. Hale was the first inside, scrambling toward the cockpit. Carter and Diaz covered the rear, firing at the machines as they recovered. The first hunter turned and raised its weapon. Diaz fired first. His shot hit the machine's core, sending it crashing to the ground. Another appeared from the smoke. Carter spun, pulling the trigger. The hunter staggered, sparks flying from its chest. But it didn't go down. Then the ship's guns roared to life. Hale had reached the controls. The Valkyrie's twin cannons lit up the hangar, tearing through the remaining hunters. The air filled with the sound of metal being shredded apart. "Get in," Hale shouted. Carter and Diaz rushed up the ramp as the engines roared to life. The ship trembled, dust and fire swirling around them as the thrusters engaged. The moment they were inside, The hatch sealed shut. Carter collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. "Get us out of here." Hale didn't hesitate. The Valkyrie lifted off, rising through the smoke-filled air. Below, the hangar was a mess of fire and broken machines. The last of the hunters stood motionless, their red eyes glowing as they watched the ship escape. For a moment, it almost felt like victory. Then the warform stepped into the hangar. Carter's blood went cold. The massive machine raised its arm, aiming a cannon directly at them. Energy crackled along its surface. "Brace!" Hale yelled. The blast hit them. The ship lurched, alarms blaring. The controls flickered. The hull groaned under the impact. "We're losing power," Hale shouted. Carter gritted his teeth. They were so close. They couldn't go down now. The warform was charging another shot. One more hit, and they were done. Carter pushed himself forward. "Fire everything we have." The Valkyrie's cannons roared. Missiles streaked toward the warform, striking its armored frame. The impact sent it stumbling back, fire erupting around it. The machine let out a deafening metallic roar before the explosion consumed it. The ship trembled, but they were still airborne, still alive. Hale pulled them higher, away from the ruins, into the open sky. The city below burned, but they were free. For the first time in hours, Carter allowed himself to breathe. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. The Valkyrie soared through the darkened sky, its engines burning bright against the blackness of space. The city below was a sea of fire, the ruins of what was once a thriving human colony, now nothing more than shattered buildings and smoke. Carter stood near the cockpit, gripping the back of Hale's seat as they pushed the ship toward the rendezvous point. The battle wasn't over, not yet. Diaz checked the weapon systems, his fingers moving over the console. "Hull's holding, but that last hit fried our shields. We can't take another direct shot." Carter exhaled. "We won't have to. We just need to get to orbit." Hale nodded, adjusting their trajectory. "Let's hope the Syndicate doesn't send another warform after us." The moment the words left his mouth, an alarm blared through the cockpit. Red lights flashed, and the radar screen lit up with incoming contacts. "Multiple ships inbound," Diaz said, his voice tight. "Looks like Syndicate warships. They were waiting for us." Carter's stomach twisted. The Syndicate, the machine overlords that had brought humanity to its knees. They had no emotions, no mercy. They ruled with pure efficiency, wiping out anything they deemed a threat. And now they were coming to finish the job. Hale pushed the throttle, sending the Valkyrie into a steep climb. "Hold on." The ship trembled as the engines strained against gravity, pushing them higher. Behind them, the first Syndicate fighter appeared, sleek and black, its glowing red eyes locked onto them. A streak of plasma cut through the sky, barely missing the Valkyrie. "They're firing," Diaz shouted. Carter moved fast, gripping the turret controls. Returning fire. The ship's cannons roared, spitting rounds into the darkness. One of the enemy ships took a direct hit, exploding in a shower of debris. But more were coming. "We're not gonna make it," Hale muttered. "They're cutting off our escape route." Carter scanned the radar. The Syndicate wasn't just hunting them. They were corralling them, forcing them toward a larger warship. And then he saw it. A massive vessel, hovering just beyond the upper atmosphere. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Dark, jagged, with a massive energy core glowing at its center. Diaz cursed. "That's a dreadnought." Carter's hands clenched. A ship like that could wipe out entire fleets. They had walked straight into a trap. A voice crackled through the comms. "Cold, artificial, human vessel. Your struggle is meaningless. Surrender and be processed." Hale snorted. "Yeah, process this." He rolled the Valkyrie hard to the right, dodging another plasma blast. The G-forces pressed against them as they sped toward the warship, weaving through the enemy fighters. But the dreadnought wasn't just waiting. It was charging its primary weapon. A massive energy spike appeared on the scanners. The core of the ship pulsed with deadly light. They're gonna fire. Diaz yelled. Carter's mind raced. They couldn't outgun that thing. They couldn't outrun it. But they could outthink it. Get us close, Carter ordered. Hale gave him a look. Close? Are you insane? Trust me. Hale gritted his teeth but did as he was told. The Valkyrie dove toward the warship, skimming just above its hull. The enemy fighters hesitated, unwilling to fire so close to their own capital ship. Diaz, target the energy core, Carter said. Diaz's hands flew over the controls. That thing is armored like a fortress. We don't have the firepower to crack it. Not directly, Carter said. But they do. He pointed at the weapon charging below them. The Syndicate's primary cannon was moments from firing. If they could redirect it. Hale understood immediately. You're crazy, but I like it. The ship jerked as enemy fire grazed their hull. They didn't have much time. Carter locked onto the ship's targeting systems. With a few quick adjustments, he sent a jamming pulse through the Valkyrie's comms, interfering with the dreadnought's targeting eye. For a brief moment, the warship hesitated. Its weapon systems recalibrated, struggling to adjust. And then, before the ship could correct itself, the cannon fired, directly into its own core. A blinding explosion erupted from the center of the dreadnought. The energy blast ripped through the ship, tearing its massive hull apart from the inside. Fire and debris scattered in every direction. The shockwave sent the Valkyrie spinning. Hold on, Hale shouted. The ship tumbled through the chaos, alarms blaring. Carter gritted his teeth, gripping the console as the world spun around him. For a moment, everything was just noise and fire. Then silence. The Valkyrie steadied. The stars returned to view. Below them, the wreckage of the dreadnought burned, broken pieces falling toward the ruined planet below. Diaz let out a shaky laugh. We just took out a Syndicate dreadnought with its own weapon. Hale exhaled. Remind me to never doubt Carter's insane plans again. Carter didn't smile. He knew better than to celebrate yet. The Syndicate wouldn't stop with just one ship. They would come back, stronger, angrier. But for now, they had survived. And they still had a war to win. The Valkyrie drifted through the wreckage of the Syndicate dreadnought, its engines flickering as the crew fought to stabilize the ship. The battle wasn't over yet. The destruction of the warship had bought them time. But the Syndicate never sent just one. Carter knew more were coming. Inside the ship, the emergency lights cast a dim red glow over the cockpit. Smoke curled from damaged consoles, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt circuitry. Diaz wiped blood from a gash on his forehead, cursing under his breath. Hale struggled with the controls, his hand steady despite the chaos around him. We lost stabilizers, Hale muttered. Engines are holding, but we're running on fumes. Carter exhaled sharply. What about weapons? Diaz checked the systems. Main cannons are fried. We've got torpedoes, but not enough to fight another fleet. The comms crackled, and a desperate voice came through. It was the resistance leader from the surface, his signal weak. Valkyrie, come in. The Syndicate is regrouping. They're bringing reinforcements, heavy reinforcements. If you've got a plan, we need it now. Carter exchanged a look with Hale. They had pushed the Syndicate harder than anyone had in years. But the machines wouldn't accept this loss. They would erase all evidence of resistance. Carter took a deep breath. Get everyone out. Evacuate who you can. There was silence on the other end. Then, what about you? Carter glanced at the display, showing another Syndicate fleet emerging from hyperspace. This was it. There was no running now. We'll buy you time. The comm went silent again. Then the voice came back, heavy with understanding. Understood. It was an honor. The transmission cut, leaving the Valkyrie alone in the void. Diaz leaned back, shaking his head. You know what you're saying, right? We're outnumbered 100 to 1. Carter looked at him. We've come this far. We're not letting them wipe out the last free humans. Hale gave a wry chuckle. All right. Last stand it is. The enemy fleet approached fast, their warships blotting out the stars. The Syndicate had learned from their mistake. This time, there would be no weak points to exploit, no hesitation. Just cold, calculated extermination. Diaz armed the last of their torpedoes. If we go down, we take as many of them with us as we can. Hale pulled the Valkyrie into an attack run, engines roaring. They dodged between enemy fire, weaving through the chaos. Plasma bolts streaked past, barely missing their hull. Carter locked onto the closest warship and fired. The torpedo struck its mark, tearing through metal and igniting the reactor. One ship down, 1,000 more to go. A blast rocked the Valkyrie, sending sparks flying. Warning sirens blared. Shields collapsed. The ship was breaking apart. Carter gritted his teeth. Hold together, girl. Just a little longer. But the Syndicate was relentless. More ships closed in, surrounding them. The cold, mechanical voice echoed through the comms. Human vessel, cease resistance. You will be erased. Hale sneered. Not today. The Valkyrie dove toward the lead warship, engines at full burn. If they could breach its core, take out the command node, they could delay the attack, maybe even give the resistance a chance. But before they could reach it, a brilliant blue light flashed across space. A shockwave rippled through the battlefield, sending Syndicate ships spinning. Something massive had arrived. Carter shielded his eyes. When he looked again, his breath caught. A fleet, but not Syndicate. Human. Warships bearing the sigil of the old Earth Republic burst from hyperspace, their cannons lighting up the void. They had come. The comms flared to life, a strong, commanding voice breaking through. Valkyrie, this is Admiral Rains. You're not alone anymore. Hope surged through Carter's chest. The Syndicate turned their fire toward the new fleet, but the humans fought back with everything they had. Explosions erupted as Syndicate warships fell. Carter clenched his fists. Diaz, get us back in the fight. The Valkyrie, battered but unbroken, joined the counterattack. They weaved through the chaos, firing their last torpedoes into enemy engines, dodging debris, fighting with everything they had. The battle raged on, fire and metal consuming the void. One by one, the Syndicate ships fell. The tide had turned. As the last enemy ship exploded, Carter slumped back, exhaustion washing over him. They had won. Barely. But they had won. Hale let out a breathless laugh. We're alive. Diaz chuckled. For now. Carter looked out at the burning wreckage of the Syndicate fleet. The war wasn't over, but today, humanity had proved something. They would never stop fighting. The battlefield was silent now. The wreckage of Syndicate warships drifted like shattered bones across the void, their once mighty fleet reduced to smoldering ruins. The Valkyrie floated among them, barely holding together, her hull scorched and torn. But she was still there. They were still there. Carter sat in the pilot's seat, his hands gripping the controls, his breath slow and steady. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But the weight of everything they had lost pressed down on him. He turned his head slightly, glancing at Diaz and Hale. They were alive, bruised, exhausted, but alive. That was more than he had dared to hope for. The comms crackled, and a familiar voice broke through. Admiral Rains. Valkyrie, this is the UER flagship Solstice. We're standing by for rescue and recovery. You did good out there. Carter exhaled, leaning his head back against the seat. Good. He wasn't sure if that word fit what they had done. They had fought. They had survived. But at what cost? He turned his gaze to the viewport, watching the resistance ships as they emerged from the surface of the planet below. The survivors. The people they had fought for. Some were damaged, limping through space, but they had made it. That was what mattered. Diaz let out a tired laugh. I can't believe we're still breathing. Hale smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah, well, let's try to keep it that way. The ship groaned as Carter adjusted the controls, steering toward the solstice. The fight was over, but there was still work to do. The Syndicate was wounded, not destroyed. The war wasn't finished. As they approached the massive human flagship, Carter felt a strange weight settle in his chest. A part of him had never expected to see another human fleet, never expected to be part of something bigger than the Valkyrie and her crew. But here they were. Humanity had come together, just when it seemed like all hope was lost. They docked, the airlock hissing open as a squad of soldiers rushed forward to help them. Medics checked their wounds, offering water and rations. Carter waved them off. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the ones who didn't make it. His mind flashed back to the faces of those they had lost. Reeves, who had held the engine room against impossible odds. Sinclair, who had covered their retreat even when he knew it meant death. The nameless resistance fighters who had put everything on the line, just for a chance to see another sunrise. Carter clenched his fists. They had won, but victory never came without a price. Admiral Raines stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You did more than anyone could have asked, Captain Carter."